Welcome to the Wayne Bennett Podcast, celebrating West Virginia's people, places, and the culture of Southern Appalachia. Now here's your host, Wayne Bennett.
Welcome to the Easy Come, Easy Go broadcast. My name is Wayne Bennett, and today we're going to talk about, I'm going to continue a series of memoirs I had when I was younger. And I don't claim that these memoirs are totally factual, but it is the way I remember them. And if you need to correct me, you can contact me at awbennett50@gmail.com. Be glad to hear from you. When I played Little League Baseball, Elks Little League was the only organization around in Beckley. And we would have to try out, and a lot of times at that time, if you didn't make it, they didn't automatically put you on a team. There were some kids that didn't make the cut. And back in those days, we're talking about early 1960s, if you weren't good enough, you didn't really get to play, even if you made the team. It wasn't every kid gets to play or every kid gets to bat so many times or whatever. There was no guarantee. So there were some kids that did make the team but played very little. And coaches did try to get you in as often as possible, but there was no such thing as participation trophies or anything back then. And some of the coaches at that time, they had a major league, which was usually made up of 11 and 12-year-olds, and there was a total of 12 teams. There was minor leagues, which usually were made up of 9 and 10-year-olds, sometimes 8-year-olds, and I think they had about the same number. They didn't have T-baseball back then, and they didn't have anything for girls. There was no girls softball at that age or anything. So it was but Elks Stadium only had two playable fields. Sometimes they played on 3, but not all the time. And the only field that had lights was the first field. And so scheduling was something else. They played. Usually we started around Mother's Day. Sometimes on Mother's Day they would have the opening ceremonies, and we would be done by the last week of July. Delbert Thurman ran the league when I was growing up, and Delbert did a good job and put a lot of time in. Of course, when you're in any kind of position of authority, you do get criticized, and you can't make everybody happy. And I'm sure Delbert received his a certain amount of criticism himself, but overall I thought he did a good job. And he always tried to come on as a grumpy old guy, get after us boys sometimes, but sometimes he needed to. But he was a pretty kind-hearted guy. Every once in a while he'd give you a free Coke or something, and that meant a whole lot to us. Some of the coaches that I remember, names that have popped up over the years, but back when I played, there was a guy by the name of Dick Sipkowski, and I think he coached the Tigers, and Co Allen coached for several years. My coach was Dido Petrantazzi. Used to run the Sunoco station out there across from the city park, and Dido put a lot of time in. We practiced a lot, had good teams, and assistant coach's last name was Garton, but I can't remember his first name. There was George and Pedro Tarico. I think George coached the Indians, and I think Pedro might have coached the Pirates. But they put a lot of time in also. Ronald Troutman had Troutman Plumbing. B.L. Bostic coached for several years out there. One of the first ones that I can remember from the 60s. Steve Passel, I think he coached the Yankees. And guy by the name of Harold I. James Robertson, Bob Bolin coached a little bit later after I was gone. Chuck Littlejohn helped him, and there was a guy named Gary Spradling or Schrader or something like that. He coached the Reds for years and worked with the kids and really did a great job, but didn't really know him personally. And I played for the Braves, and we played in the Eastern League. And some of my teammates were a guy by the name of Mike Garton, real good ball player. Steve Licklider, who went on, had fame at Woodrow Wilson, and Morse Harvey. He played baseball, basketball, and was a tremendous athlete. Derek Samala, who was a good athlete, came from the Samala family, who played several sports. I think there was 3 or 4 of them, Ron and Robert and Derek, and those guys played a lot at Woodrow Wilson. A boy by the name of Bobby Piper played first base. Gene Petrantazzi, his dad was the coach. Gene pitched and played short. Paul Ragland, Phil O'Neill, a guy named Larry Lyons, Mike Lucchini, Fred Roberts, he played center field and caught. John Wooten, John played outfield and caught sometimes, I think. And of course, he went on in Woodrow and played football and basketball, and went to WVU and played basketball. And then he also ran track in high school. John Hamrick, and those are the ones I can remember. The Elks Club sponsored the league, and at that time, even though segregation had been outlawed in the early 50s, it was still prevalent in our area, and blacks were not allowed to play at Beckley Little League. And so if you were of Little League age and you wanted to play baseball, you had to either go to Sophia or Route 41, which was out towards Stanford, and they let blacks play. And several Beckley kids did go those directions, and it was, I don't know exactly what year they finally lifted that ban. I know when I played Midget League football, that was the same rule the first year, and then when I was 12 years old, it was ran by the Civitan Club, and Dave Friday was the director. But when I was 12 years old, they started letting blacks play, and continued after that. But that was one of the worst parts of history and how things evolved. But these guys had, we would play everybody in the league at least twice. Then they'd have a round-robin tournament at the end and declare a league championship. Nowadays, with the way Little League is run, they have T-ball, they have several different teams with kids. All the kids get to play. They have a great program for girls, and it's involves quite a number of kids, probably a lot more than what we played. Also during that time, now I lived right across from the Little League fields, and we had several boys in our neighborhood, and we would go over when it was dew still on the ground, and we'd start playing baseball during the day in the summer, and usually around 12 o'clock, 1 o'clock, whoever was taking care of the fields would come out and start mowing fields, or they would put lines on the field. They have to do that every day. And some of the guys that I remember, the first guy I remember was Vic Peelish, who was coach at Woodrow Wilson High School, and he would come out and get the 2 fields ready, first and second field, and then umpire that evening. And it was since he was a teacher, that was a summer job for him. And of course, in August he would start football practice. So I guess it's one of the reasons why Beckley Little League usually ended by that time. Then there was another guy by the name of Chuck Akers. He came out and worked several years doing that. And Chuck ended up being a principal and had a doctorate degree in education. And I think he hung around a couple of years. Ross Hutchins, who was a teacher and a guidance counselor and ended up being a principal at Woodrow Wilson High School. Ross would work. He worked a few years over at Little League also during the summer. And Pete Colacerto came in after Ross Hutchins, and he worked too. And of course, then they started adding play on the third field, so it became a little more of a job. Now, a lot of times we would hang around and help the guys who were getting the fields ready, especially if they had to spray them down a little bit or put the lines down. We would help do that, and especially if they were running behind, they would always welcome the help. And they wouldn't pay us anything. I'm not even sure what they got paid, but they would give us an old waterlogged baseball or a broken bat, and something we could tape up and use in our sandlot play. So it was special to us, and we always wanted to help. A bat was a hot commodity. If you got a bat, you're really good. But most of the time we'd get a baseball that might have a seam broken or something might be a little waterlogged, but they give us something. Very, very seldom pay us. Now, if in a baseball games, if you won a game, usually a parent or a coach sometimes would set you up, and they would you could go to the concession stand, they would give you a free hot dog and a Coke, and believe me, that was a huge incentive back then to get something like that. And I think later on, it almost got to be kids expected it whether they won or not, and it was kind of took away the luster of the hot dog and a Coke, but it was something different. Then when I went to Babe Ruth, 13-year-old, I played for New River Supply. Frank Baber and Dick Cole was our coach, and we weren't very good. We had two best players we had was a guy named Steve Brooks and a guy named Don Frazier. And they were good ball players, but the rest of us was pretty young and didn't win too many games that year. I think we were about 3-12 was our record. And then later we had, when I was 14 and 15, we had coaches Russ Neely, had a coach named Mr. Cassidy. I can't remember his first name. He had a son named David that played on the team, and David was the best player we had. He played shortstop and pitched, and he went on and played high school ball, played some American Legion ball, and was really an outstanding baseball player. And unfortunately, David, right after high school, was fishing down on New River and drowned, and he never got to play more ball there, even though he was only about 18, 19 years old. There was then we had our last coach when I was 15. We had a pretty good team when I was 15, and guys like Mike Adderson, Marvin Harvey, I mentioned Cassidy, David Neely, Wayne Blevins, Pat McMillan. All those guys were pretty good ball players, and so I think we won about 9 games, lost 7, and David and I made the All-Star team. But unfortunately, back then we had to play there was an Eastern and Western division, so we had to play the Western division to see who came out of Beckley, and the Western division was the one that was loaded up with the better players, and even though we played a little bit over our head when we played them, and they went on the Western League went on and won quite a few games in the state and East Regional tournament. But there was some, and back then, as opposed to now, they didn't have a big screen up at Babe Ruth. They just in right field. Now they got a big screen. It's a little harder to hit a home run there. And at that time when we played, they just had the regular fence, and it was short. So if you were a left-handed batter or you hit that direction, you had more chance to hit a home run than the right-handed batters or the people who hit to left field. So it was a little bit different. When I tried out for Babe Ruth when I was 13, there was a big talk of a guy by the name of Edmund Hanna. And Edmund had played over in Route 41 League at Stanford and hit a bunch of home runs and everything. Well, when he came to Babe Ruth, he was a pretty good-sized guy. And he played when he was 13, and so we were all wanting to watch him when he was trying out and batting. And I remember he was trying so hard, he swung 2 or 3 different times and fell completely down trying to hit a home run. And my immediate impression was maybe this guy's not as good as they say he is. But after he was picked, he had a cousin, I think, by the name of David, and Edmund panned out to be a pretty good ball player. And I think they both played high school ball at Woodrow Wilson. And it was we also had Joe Rodriguez ran Babe Ruth at that time, and we did all the 13-year-olds made the All-Stars. That's the first year, made the 13-year-old All-Stars. And later on, when Sarge Maynard took it over, they had actually a 13-year-old league, and those guys played a lot statewide and regionally, and but Sarge made a lot of different additions to Babe Ruth when he came about. Also, during the time that we played, Jeff Miller, whom I graduated with, he kept the score at Babe Ruth for several years, and I'm assuming he got paid for it because he showed up every night and would work there. And not only did he keep the score, he would keep players' batting averages. He would RBIs, several different stats. He would put team stats out, and about once a week he would put the stats, post them on the outside of the press box so the players could see them. And that was good and bad in some ways for Jeff, because a lot of the players enjoyed seeing him, but sometimes they disagreed because Jeff didn't give them a hit when they were supposed to, or what they thought supposed to, or they thought they had an RBI when they actually didn't get one. So sometimes he would be the victim of disdain, but he did it all the way through high school, and it was like an every night job. But some of the teams that played at Babe Ruth at that time that I can remember was Keatley's. Used to be a sporting goods store uptown, about the only one sporting goods store at that time. Had a team called King Photo, which was a camera and a shop at uptown. They had a New River Supply, Eric's Jewelry, Raleigh Motor Sales had a team, Bays Buick, one of the car dealerships in Beckley, and then Blue Ridge Memorial Gardens had a team, and that's about all I can think of right now. There may have been others, but it was a good time. And again, though, if you weren't good enough, then you sit the bench. And I don't think anybody was permanently scarred over that. But that was my experience with baseball growing up as a youth. One footnote, it was on a Little League excursion that I got to see my first professional baseball game. Usually at the end of the season, Little League would gather people in the league that wanted to go to watch a professional baseball game, and they usually went to Cincinnati. And back then, we could get the Reds on the radio, and about everybody, all the kids around were usually Cincinnati fans. But that particular year, they wanted to go to Washington, and so we got left on a train, and we went up real early, and we got to go to a couple of the sites, stayed a few minutes at Smithsonian. Everything was real fast paced. They had a charter bus there when we got there, and then they took us to JFK Stadium. I think it's what it was called later, or RFK Stadium, and it's where the Washington Senators play. And the Senators were one of the worst teams in the league, but they were playing the Cleveland Indians at that time, and it was an afternoon Saturday game, and we got to watch them take batting practice. And Washington had a couple players. Ed Brinkman, he played shortstop. He was a pretty good ball player, and a big guy named Frank Howard, who came over from the Dodgers. And when he didn't strike out, he usually had home run. That was about it. But enjoyable to watch. But that particular day, Cleveland had a guy named by the name of Gene Green, and he hit 3 home runs that day, and Cleveland won. But I started following the Senators, and even though, like I said, they weren't very good, later on, when I had relatives that moved to the Washington area, I got an opportunity to see them a little later, and that's the only time I ever saw Mickey Mantle play live. And when the Yankees were in town, and of course Mickey was at that time was on his last legs, near retirement. He'd had 2 or 3 knee operations, and he wasn't the player that he was when he first came up. But he was still brought a lot of excitement to the game, and it was enjoyable. Of course, now the Washington they dissipated their team for a while, and then they came back, and now they're the Nationals, and that's a whole different story in itself. But I'm still a Cincinnati fan, and I'm still a Nationals fan. And Nationals won championship a couple years ago, and looking for something good to happen this year. But Little League excursions were you paid $20, and is money that I'd saved up myself, and you go up, and you're responsible for your own food. But we got to go see some of the sightsee a little bit, go to the ball game, come back, and you do it all in one day. You go up early in the morning, do all this, come back that night, and get home early the next morning. So I mean, you're worn out even if you're a kid. But it was fun, and it's something that I always remember. And first time I got to watch professional baseball. So thanks for listening, and remember, if you ain't dead yet, you ain't done yet. And until next week, God bless you.